during the session. I will request to mute all of you, your audio. Okay, thank you, questions. So, and
Yeah, so as you already know that today's topic is introduction to decision tree and
you
ensembling.
can process.
Yeah. So as you know that the topic is introduction to decision tree and ensembling, uh, I have thought of adding, few other things over here. So already Gitosri ma'am has given a, hello. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I think I lost everyone in between.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, it's
so
okay.
is the screen still visible?
Yeah, screen is not visible. Yeah, yeah, it's visible. Hello.
Let me try again. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay. So I think Geetushree ma'am has given an excellent introduction. So only other thing that I would like to mention is that the Calcutta University Data Science Lab uh, is having a collaboration of University of Colorado Boulder, where we have an initiative called as LISA. So the objective is to spread knowledge of data science and statistics to the community, and through not only lectures but also through projects, real life projects which can help the society. Okay. uh, so apart from our usual topic of basic working of decision tree and ensembling, I would like to give a very short introduction to ML and classification, maybe around 5 to 10 minutes. Then I will go to basic working of decision tree. I'll move to ensemble, and then I will also give you a roadmap to learn machine learning, how to get started, what are some of the good resources, and finally we'll talk about maybe for a couple of minutes about some of the initiatives of data science lab. Okay. All right. uh, so this is an example I always start with. Let's say you want to write a program which will identify an email as a spam email or a normal email. Okay. And this is integrated right now with your Google Mail. So some of the mails gets associated or gets tagged as promotional, if you have seen. All right. uh, so if you have to write a program like this, one of the things that you can do is probably you can think of some of the words which are frequent in such kind of email. So that can be the word free, that can be the word discount, that can be with something to do with money and credit card and all that. Okay. So one possible approach will be that you list down all such words. Okay. And then you write a code so that you can count occurrence of such words uh, in that email. So if it is beyond certain threshold, you call that email as a spam email. Okay. So let's say you call this as bad words or something. Okay. And if you have more than 5 bad words, you classify this email as a spam email. Okay. So this is we can do in our normal programming techniques that we are aware of. However, there are some issues. What are the issues? The issues are that there is no such exhaustive list of words, right? Uh, and even if they are, the list is very hard to maintain. And you know that spammers are smart people, so they will always try to outsmart you. They will try to spell it in different way, and try to bypass the logic that you have put through. Okay. uh, so uh, using your traditional way, okay, uh, you can have a flowchart like this. All right. So the flowchart is that you study the problem, okay, and you write the rules. So what are the rules? The rules are that you find occurrence of these words, you count them, and then you evaluate means that with that rule you see that for how many of the emails you are going right. All right. And if you are not getting, so then you analyze error, because these rules are not going to give you 100% correct result. So you are going to analyze the result, and if you see maybe a certain percentage, let's say 80% of the cases you are right, you launch that in your production. You say that, okay, this is my full-fledged, program which can identify an email as a spam email or a normal email. Okay. Um, However, with machine learning, the flow gets changed like this. So do you notice the change? So you see that this write rules part is now actually eliminated. So this is no longer here. Rather than that, you have data and you are doing something like training an ML algorithm. Okay. And of course, you have a feedback path. So if your performance is not good enough, then you again go back and study the problems. You don't stop there. Okay. Uh, so what is this data and training the ML algorithm part? So essentially what happens is that you will give some emails and their classification. So whether they are normal email or spam email, okay, and you will have an algorithm which will learn these patterns from this data. So earlier, what was happening was that we were doing an explicit programming, right? We were writing an explicit if then else rules. If these words are there, then you mark it as a spam email, you count them. However, when you are going for a machine learning based approach, you don't have any explicit programming. You have a framework which actually learns from the data and comes up with these rules. Okay. All right. So now let's move to the classification problem of machine learning. So if you look at this diagram, okay, so these are same as what I was discussing, that you have some records, you can call them as rows, and you have their corresponding labels. So you have some attributes for this species, and it is said that it's a duck. About this species, this is also called as a duck, and this is not a duck, and this is not a duck. Okay, so you actually train a supervised model, and which gives you an output which is a machine learning model. Okay, so actually you have two phases here. This phase you call as the training phase, and then you come to the prediction phase. So here what happens is that a species is given and you can predict the level. Okay, so one thing that is important, or that you should notice, is that we no longer have a label associated with this species. Okay, so this is what you are actually predicting. Similar to the example that I gave, that if some unknown emails are coming and you are giving that as an input to the predictive email, it will tell that whether it is a spam email or a normal email. Okay, so now as we have classification, there is another supervised technique called as regression. Okay, so what's the difference between classification and regression? So in classification, the output is a categorical variable. So here we are saying it is dark or not dark, and there is a specific list of attributes. Okay? However, in case of regression, your output is a numerical variable. All right. Just give me a second. Okay. So for time being, I have muted everyone. Okay. So I'll unmute maybe later on. Okay. So as I was discussing, that we have one classification problem and another is a regression problem. So in classification problem, the output variable is a categorical variable, which can be dark and not dark. And in case of a regression model, what happens is that your output is a numerical variable. Okay, and let's say you are trying to predict the wind velocity of a storm. Okay, so that will come under a regression problem. All right, so we have now understood that how to, or we build a model, right? But building a model is not good enough. Okay, so what we need to also do is we need to evaluate such a model. So this is also a very, very important concept, okay, which is called as a confusion metric. Okay, so let me quickly give you an understanding of confusion metric. All right, so what you actually do is you you have some data on which you are doing a prediction. So at one side you have the predicted values, and other side you already know what were their actual values. So before actually you run your model into production, you try to run your model on your known data set where you know the labels, and then you want to compare that what was the actual level and what is the prediction. Okay, so let's say there are two classes, and let me tell the spam email as a positive class and the non-spam as the negative class. Okay, so there will be some cases where you have predicted the email to be spam, and actually the email is also a spam. Okay, so such cases you call this as a true positive. All right, now there will be some cases where actually they were not spam, but you predicted them to be spam, so you call such cases as false negative. Similarly, you have false negative and true negative. All right, so true negative is nothing but the email was not a spam, and you also predicted correctly that it is not a spam. Okay, now you can understand that you basically want to maximize this true positive and true negatives. Okay, so this is what you actually want to maximize, and you want to minimize this false negative and false positive. Okay, so basically you measure a classifier by this ratio, which is often called as classification ratio, which is ratio of this true positive plus true negative divided by all the observations that are there in your data set. Okay, so before I move ahead, here is some food for thought for you. So we understood that our objective will be to reduce false positive and false negative. All right, however, do you think that false positive and false negative should be treated similarly? Okay, so let me try to give you an example. So let's say you have installed a camera in an airport, and you are trying to analyze activity of passengers or activity of commuters in the airport, and you want to classify whether the activity of the passenger is suspicious or not. So the positive class is suspicious, not positive class is not suspicious. So let's see what is a false negative. So false negative is that he is actually a threat, but your algorithm didn't find him. Whereas false positive is that he was not a threat, but your model identified him as a threat. So can you tell me that which one is more harmful, right? So you can understand the first one, the false negative, is more dangerous, because if my model doesn't identify a suspicious people or people having suspicious activity correctly, he can come inside and may blow also the airport, right? Whereas if it is a false positive, maybe the passenger will be irritated, okay, and he will not be very happy and cooperative, but it will still be fine. So from problem to problem, this false positive and false negative will have different weights associated with it. All right, so now another question is that if you think very abstractly, let's say these are your two classes. Okay, and so one class is actually students who are doing not that great in placement, and then this blue class is students who are actually doing well in placement. So all these circles actually present students. So basically you have a tabular data. Okay, so you have a tabular data. All right, and you have one row for each student. Okay, so you have first student, his English score, second student, his math score. Okay, so that way you have each of the rows. All right, and that you have drawn in this 2D diagram. So this is called as a scatter plot. So a classifier can be thought as nothing but a curve which actually separates these two classes. Okay, so let me repeat this. So there are two classes in a classification problem. You are always trying to classify. So in a two class problem, okay, you are trying to find students who will do well in placement, okay, or who will not do well in placement. So these are your two classes. And what are given as an input? Maybe their math score in some of the subjects and English score in some of the subjects, okay. So, this black line can work as a classifier, as well as this green line can also work as a classifier. Do you see that? So now let's say there is an unknown observation. Let's say there is an observation like this, which comes in. So what you will say that, oh, it is on the right side of this green line, so he will do well in placement, okay. So this is how, the classifier works, okay. So now the question is that you can see that this green line represents one classifier and this black line also represents one classifier. All right. So which classifier is actually better, right? So if you look at the data and think in terms of the classification accuracy that we discussed, you can probably realize that, this one, the green one, will give better classification accuracy. Okay. So, those who are not speaking, will you please go on mute? Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, hi. So, okay. Actually, I have muted again everyone, but then that gets unmuted time to time. Sorry about that. Okay. So, if you see here, so this is also a classifier, this is also a classifier, and you can understand that this green line will give you a better classification accuracy, right? So if you look at the boundary of the green line compared to the black line, it will give you a better classification accuracy. But you will be surprised to know that in real life, we don't pick the green line as the classifier, but we end up choosing the black line as the classifier. What is the reason? Because it turns out that even your models has a tendency to memorize, okay. So one classifier can just try to store all this data in memory and tell you based on what it is storing in the memory, right? As we see with our students, I am sure all of us have that experience, okay. uh, Whereas the black line is more generalized, so when it will see unknown instances, then it will generalize much better, right? So this tendency of memorizing is called as overfitting as far as machine learning is concerned, okay. All right, now let us go and look at some of the applications of classification and regression, okay. So banking. In banking, one problem where classification is applied is whether to provide a loan to a customer or not. So you look at different characteristics of the customer. You already have previous data of the customers, okay. So what were their characteristics, when a loan was given to them, whether they paid back fully or not, and you can apply for whether to provide a loan to a customer or not. So in case of medical domain, you can apply this to find patients which may need emergency medication. So emergency medication means that he will having some emergency medical condition for which there will be some expensive medical procedures to be applied, okay. uh, Social media. So you can understand right now what was going on, identifying a news as a fake news or a real news, okay. So this is also one of the important cases, okay. uh, then let's come to entertainment, okay. uh, so this is one problem we have particularly worked on, predicting the box office return of a movie, okay. So this is not a classification problem, this is a regression problem, because you are trying to find the numerical value. From telecom, you can find out which customer is going to churn. Churn means that they are going to move away from Airtel to Jio. So right now, probably there is no decision making, everyone is moving, but this is an ideal scenario from telecom. Insurance, you want to identify which claims are fraudulent claims or not. So this is also a very, very important problem. Even right now, with so much of online things coming up, You also need to identify whether a transaction is a fraud transaction or not. Okay. Sports, even this area we have worked on. So what should be a good auction price for a player, maybe in IPL. Okay. Security, so identify a network packet as an attack or a normal traffic. Okay, so all these cases you can apply classification and regression. These are only tips of the iceberg. So across application domains there are until number of examples in classification and regression. All right, so now let's come to decision tree. Okay, so let's consider a very simple example. Let's say we want to develop a classifier using decision tree. So that I will come to a little later. And I want to predict a movie, whether it will fall into any of these three categories. Okay, so basically there are some attributes of the movie, and we want to identify whether this movie is a mainstream hit, a critic's choice, or a box office bust. So these are your three classes. So the idea is, you will take a new movie, you will look at the attributes, and before the movie releases you will be able to tell that whether it will be a mainstream hit, whether it will be a critic's choice, or it will be a box office bust. Okay, so we are simplifying the problem. We see that these are called as your dependent variable or target variable, what you are trying to predict, and these are your independent variable. What are your independent variable? Your shooting budget and number of A-list celebrities in that movie. All right, so basically when you will get a new movie and you get the budget and how many number of A-list celebrities are there, you will be able to tell that whether that movie is going to be a hit, critic's choice, or box office bust. So the first thing is, like our student classification example, we draw it in a scatter diagram. Okay, and all the three classes are marked with different icons. Okay, so these ones, okay, are critical success ones. Okay, marked in this green square. The blue triangles are your mainstream hits, and these red circles are your box office bust. So actually each of these points, please understand, correspond to a movie. Okay, is it all right? So what you now want to do is, you again, as I said, the classifier can be very generally thought to be drawing some lines. Okay, so what you will do is, okay, you will try to split this region into two areas such that the splits are more and more homogeneous. So what do I mean by more homogeneous? So this is also called as more pure. So this region, so if you see, so you have region 1 over here and region 2 over here. Okay, so you want this to be as pure as possible. So can you tell me which one of this is more pure? So you can look at and tell me that R2 is more pure, right? Why it is more pure? Because you see that this box office bust are more. However, this split is almost equally poised between mainstream hit and critical success, right? So probably I need another split. Okay, so if I do another split, somewhere here, you see that now here you have all critical success, and here you have quite a good amount of box office hits, right? So essentially what decision tree tries to do is, it tries to draw lines. Okay, it tries to draw lines which will generate rectangular decision regions, so that these decision regions are more and more pure, less and less mixed. Okay, all right. So a decision tree has a name like this because these attributes, whatever we discussed, whatever classification and all that we discussed, can be represented in a diagram like this. Okay, and computer scientists are the little crazy people, so they always assume that the tree's root is at the top. Okay, so this is your decision tree, and initially what you have is you have three type of movies, and if you look at the purity of this particular node, okay, which is your root node, you see that it is not at all pure. Okay, it is completely heterogeneous. All type of movies are present. So next, what you do is you check the number of celebrities. So if the number of celebrities are low, you see that there is a critical success in case of one cases, mainstream hit in one case, okay, and then box office burst in again 10 cases. So such a node uh, such a node you put as box office bust. Okay, so you may be asking that why, so it is still not a pure node, right? It is not 12 by 12. So why do I stop here? So go back to the example of that black classifier and green classifier. So if we try to go where 12 out of 12 will be correct, your classifier will end up actually memorizing your data. Okay, so that's why you'll stop here. So now if number of celebrities is high, what you see is that critical success is also 9, mainstream hit is also 9. Again, a completely heterogeneous mixture. So what you next see is you look at the other attribute. Is the budget high? If the budget is high, you see that out of 10 cases, 9 are mainstream hit. And if the budget is low, it is critical success. So decision tree actually generates such a nice visualization of its working process. Okay, so that's why it is called as a white box model. So I'll come to that in a minute. So there are some terminologies associated. So this node is called as a root node, and anywhere a split is happening, so you see that you are checking number of celebrities here. Okay, so this is a split node. You are checking the budget over here, so this is also a split node. uh, internal node is this one. Okay, internal node is this one. Okay, because you cannot take a decision over here, so it is not a root node. Neither it is a leaf node, and leaf node or terminal node is somewhere where you have already taken a decision, like here. Okay, so these are all your leaf node or terminal node. Okay, so these are some terminologies associated with decision tree. So decision trees are intuitive, they are easy to interpret, and as I said, that's why they are called as white box model. Okay, so you have already some past data available. From that you generated this decision tree. Now you have an unknown movie. Let's say that number of celebrities are high, and as well as the budget is high. If such a new movie comes, what you have to do is, to take the decision, you just follow the decision tree. You see, okay, number of celebrities is high, so I take this path. Then I see, oh, budget is also high, so you will predict the movie is going to be a mainstream hit. Okay, so that's how a decision tree classifier works. Now this is a like very simple classifier, but in spite of that, this is quite favorite to the users, because the decision making is very easy and understandable to the end user. So when you are working on banking domain, finance domain, they would like to know that how your algorithm is working. You are taking an algorithm, you have written a piece of code and telling that I am getting an accuracy of 80%, that will not satisfy them. Okay, all right. So now one of the things, let's do a little bit of maths. Okay, so one of the things that actually is important is that how do you split this? So we have taken a very simple example where we only have two attributes, right? Number of celebrities and budget. And you can understand that this is not realistic. There may be 500 other things which are important, which influences a movie to be a hit or not. All right. So how do I actually decide that which attributes to be picked first? So I should definitely, pick such an attribute which is most discriminative. What do I mean by discriminative? Discriminative means that that attribute can create more pure groups compared to unpure or heterogeneous groups. And for that, we take help of a concept called as entropy. Okay, so entropy is defined for a data for a random variable, and basically you have different states over here. So what will happen over here is, can you tell me how many A's were there in the data that we discussed? So actually there were 3 A's, right? So these A's are equal to the number of classes, right? Mainstream hit, critical success, and box office bust. So for all of them, you find out the probability. Okay, so if you remember, so we have 10 movies, right, for each category, and total 30 movies. So for each one of them, this probability will be 1/3, and then you will take a log of this 1/3 and you will sum it up. Okay, so as you know, the probability will always be less than 2. So this, if you remember from logarithm, so this will be a negative figure, right? This will be a negative figure. So that's why you put a final minus sign where this entropy will be a positive number. Okay, now you let's understand a little bit more about entropy with an example. So let's take our coin toss problem, right? Now in the coin toss, there can be 2 outputs, head and tail. Okay, so let's say they have probabilities like this. So what do I mean by that? So probability of head and tail is 0.5, 0.5 if it is a unbiased coin, right? So both of them are equally probable. And then we have slowly biased this. Okay, we have slowly biased this, and finally you have a situation like in the movie, that in all cases you will get a head. Okay, now entropy is actually a measure of uncertainty. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So if your group is completely mixed or completely heterogeneous, your entropy will be high. Okay, because uncertainty is high. And as you move to purer groups, your entropy will come down. Okay, so can you tell me that which is the most uncertain case over here? Okay, so you can see that this is the most uncertain case, because you cannot tell whether it will be head or tail. Both are equally probable. However, in the last case, you know that the probability of head is 1, so it is a completely certain case. Okay, all right. So now if I calculate the entropy, okay, using the formula that I have given you, okay, so these are the corresponding log of these probabilities. So 0.5 is nothing but 1/2, right? So 1/2 is nothing but 2 to the power minus 1. Okay, so that's why the log of 0.5 comes to be -1. And next what you do is you actually multiply this probability and log probability. Okay, all right. So if I do that, so what I get is I multiply 0.5 with -1 and multiply this 0.5 with -1, and I go on. Okay, and I then take the final negative. So this is the entropy corresponding to the first case, and you can see that in first case the entropy is 1. Okay, so this is completely uncertain, and when it is a certain case, the entropy has gone down to 0. Okay, so what we want the terminal nodes to be having entropy 0. Okay, so we have just plotted this here. Okay, so when it was perfectly poised, the entropy was 1, and slowly as the probability of head has gone to 1, your entropy has gone up to 0. So there is no uncertainty at all. Okay, so this is formalized in a measure called as an information gain. So please pay little bit of attention. So what we are doing is, so this is your root node over here. Okay, and let me call this as let me call that this has an entropy of ER. Okay, so entropy of root node, I am calling it as ER, and let's take the entropy of these two nodes. Okay, and let me call this as E of N. Okay, So entropy of nodes. All right. So basically what you want is that you want this information entropy of the node to be very low, right? Isn't it? Because then only you have less uncertain situation. So this ER and EN, as we discussed, this ER minus EN actually gives you the information gain. Okay. And if you have several attributes, okay, if you have several attributes, let's say A1, A2, A3, etc. Okay. So wherever, let's say A1 has an entropy of information gain of 0.5 and A2 has an information gain of 0.3. So naturally you will first split by A1. Okay. Is this clear to you? Okay. So now we have seen an example that if one of the attributes, let's say A1, generates a split like this, and another attribute A2 generates a split like this, you know, which attribute you should pick. So how to do this information gain calculation? Okay. So the calculation is done over here. So basically, you know, you calculate the probability of these classes. So class 1 here is 0.75, class 2 is 0.25. In the second case, it is 0.25 here and 0.75 here. You calculate the corresponding logs, and then you calculate the corresponding entropy. Okay. Similarly, for the second case also, you calculate the entropy. So this difference, right? So initially, if you remember, if you have perfect group like this, so both the classes have equal probability of 50%, the entropy is 1. So you know that using this attribute, your information gain is about 0.19, and here your information gain is 0.32. So of course, you will pick this attribute or you will choose this split, right? So that is how the decision tree works. It finds out iteratively that which attribute will give you better split in terms of information gain, and it continues. Okay. All right. So this is what we wanted to cover about decision tree. Okay. Now we will go to the concept of ensembling. Okay. And probably ensembling can be best understood by the game show Kaun Banega Crorepati. So why do I say that? Because if you remember, there was an option called as audience poll. Okay. And there were quite difficult questions in some cases, not maybe all cases, but some cases the questions were difficult. And it might have amazed you that how come the average result of the audience poll is actually giving you correct result, right? They are not the best experts. Okay. So this is called as crowd intelligence, that if you ask a lot of people and you take an average of their decision, it turns out that you have quite a good decision than even sometime asking an expert. Okay. So this concept, this simple concept of crowd intelligence is embodied in ensembling. All right. So let's look at an example now. Okay. So what we are trying to do is that you have a classifier. So there are several classifiers. One of them is decision tree. Okay. So there is classifiers like logistic regression. There's classifier like SVM. There's classifier like random forest. So random forest is also an ensemble classifier, but just assume that these are kind of your experts. Okay. So instead of training only one model, what you are doing is you are training multiple models on the same data. Okay. So this is also a classification data. So this blue actually denotes one class, and this uncolored also denote another class. Okay. So you are using that to train all these classifiers. Okay. Now what happens is when an unknown unlabeled instance comes, you want to classify this. Okay. So how do you classify? So you actually see that this classifier's decision is 1. Okay. So this is the uncolored class. This classifier is also calling as 1. Only this classifier is calling as 2, and the last classifier is also calling as 1. Okay. So what will be the decision now? So you will take the majority vote. just like the audience poll case I discussed, and the final prediction will be 1. Are you getting it? So this scheme is called as majority vote scheme, and this is also called as hard classifier, okay, or called as hard voting. So you can understand when I'm talking about hard voting, there must be something called as soft voting, which will come shortly. So how do we do for regression? So for regression, what happens is that it doesn't give a class like that. So maybe, you know, this gives a this gives a result like 25, okay, this gives a result like 28, this gives a result like 30. So you know, these are not classes, right? These are numerical attributes which it is predicting, okay, and this gives 32. So what you do is you sum them up and you average that as your prediction, okay. All right, now one of the question that can come to your mind is that why does it work, okay. So it definitely sounds very counter intuitive that how this can actually work, okay. So let's you know, take an example. So let's say that you are taking 3 classifiers, okay, and individual classifiers actually has a classification accuracy of 70%, okay. So please follow the maths. It is very simple, but you will have to follow it, okay. So what we need to do, what we need to see is that instead of one classifier which gives me a classification accuracy of 70%, okay, if I use 3 classifier, does my classification accuracy goes up? So that is what we are trying to do over here, okay. So you know, here one of the cases that all of the classifiers are correct. So if you consider, so this actually you know, uses concepts of independent events or independent probabilities. So basically, what is the probability that all of the 3 will be correct at the same time? So it will be 0.7 into 0.7 into 0.7, right? Okay, so this gives you a 0.3429 probability, or basically 34.29% of time you will be correct, okay. All right, so you might be already little disheartened that we started from 70% and we are at 34%. Is it really going to work? So there is one more case where 2 of them are correct and 1 of them are incorrect, okay. So that case, you can find the probability like this. So there will be 3 cases, right? So first case, classifier 1 is correct, okay. Second case, classifier 2 is correct. Third, and then classifier 3 is not correct. So this is case 1, okay. Case 2, classifier 1 is correct, classifier 2 is not correct, and case 3 and classifier 3 is correct. Similarly, you have the last case where the classifier 1 has gone wrong, and you know, if you add up this probability, this goes to 44.09, and if you use majority vote, then in these cases also you will be correct, right? So if you add them up, you can see that this 34.29 plus 44.09, you have more than 78% classification accuracy, isn't it? Okay, so case 3, 1 is correct, here you are going wrong, and case 4, all of them are incorrect, 2.7% time. Here also your classification, if you are using 3 classifier, that will go wrong, okay. So if you add it up, as I said, you know, I will get 78.3% for 3 classifiers. If I increase it to 5 classifier, it will go up to 83.6%. And if there are 7 classifiers, it will go up to 87.4%. Okay. So that's why actually ensembling works. All right. Now let's look at another example. Okay. So let's say again we have 3 classifiers, and you know, 1 is where this classifier has gone right, and 0 is where this classifier has gone wrong. So you see that this classifier has gone right 80% of the cases, next one has gone right 80% of the cases, and last one 70% of the cases. In ensembling, you are doing a majority voting, okay, and you are getting an accuracy, overall accuracy of 80%. Okay. So now you might question me that how this is happening, right? How this is happening, because uh, you know, your one of the classifier was 80% and your ensemble is also 80%. So there is no improvement. Okay. So why
So,
this is happening is because these classes are completely correlated, right? So this classifier and this classifier, they have no difference, right? And when we multiplied the classification accuracy of the classifiers, you know, we could only multiply because we assume that they are independent of each other. All right. Okay. So, you know, take another case where one classifier has 80% accuracy, another has 70% accuracy, another has 60% accuracy, and overall you have 90% accuracy, right? Here, why it is 90%? Because, you know, they are uncorrelated to each other. So only when the classifiers are diverse, if you ask the same people, same type of people, you know, you will not get any better intelligence. All right. So just give me a moment. বাবা ক্লাস চলছে আমার, আধ ঘন্টা লাগবে আরো। হ্যাঁ, আধ ঘন্টা লাগবে। Sorry about that. Okay. All right. So basically, you know what happens, that if you think that this plus is a class, minus is a class, and these were decision boundary of your individual classifiers, okay, then when you combine them, you can get a better decision boundary like the blue one. So you can see this red one, though it was correct, was more tilted to the negative side. This was more towards the positive side. This was quite curvy. However, you know, here if you see, this is a quite balanced decision boundary. Okay. Now let's come to hard voting and soft voting. So one of the things that the classifiers gives as output is the class labels. Okay. However, most of the classifiers, instead of the class labels, can also give the classifier probability. So it actually gives you probability of each of the classes. Okay. So what do I mean by that? So basically, you know, it can give a probability that class 1, so it predicts class 1 with probability 0.51 for one observation, right? And it also says that 0.49 probability for class 2, right? So it is not completely sure. Okay. And some of these rows will always be 1. So in this case, if you use a hard voting, okay, your decision will be that it is C1, okay, for that particular row. However, if you use the soft voting, okay, and you sum the probabilities and average it, your decision will be class 2. Okay. So you can say the grain of the decision making is much more in case of a soft voting classifier. Okay. So another type of classifier is called as bagging classifier or bootstrap classifier. So here what happens is that basically you have your data, okay, and you split it into different sets. So you create one set from here, another set from here using random sampling, okay, and then you create different models on each one of them, and then you forecast, you predict, and finally you average them out. Okay. So maybe you are using the same model, you are not using different models, but what you are given them is different kind of data generated using random sampling. All right. Okay. So for that, there is a term which comes in, is called as bootstrap sampling. Okay. And what bootstrap sampling does is, this is just for your knowledge, that in bootstrap sampling, actually samples can repeat. So this was your original data where you have 3 observations, and you are creating bootstrap samples which are also 3 observations. However, in your, you know, sample set 1 and sample set 3, you see there is repetition. Okay. So when you do like this is called as bootstrap sampling. And you know, there are several other variations. So when you use this kind of bootstrap sampling, then you the ensemble model that you come up with, you call that as a bagging model. However, if your repetition is not allowed, you call that as a pasting model. Okay, so these are just some of the terminologies. Okay, and you know how the decision boundary also improves. So this we have seen one example. This is another example. So individual decision tree can have a decision boundary which is like this, which is not at all smooth. Okay, so the thing that I was telling you, that memorizing and overfitting is happening. However, if you use with bagging, this can generate such a nice decision boundary. Okay, all right. So there is another ensembling model called as stacking. So in stacking is also very interesting. So what happens is, so let me show you the example. So basically, you know, so this is my raw data set. Okay, and here you have another metadata set. So this is your metadata set. Okay, so what you have actually done is, instead of predicting on the raw data, you have created another data where you have seen what this base learner 1 has predicted, what this base learner 2 has predicted, what this base learner 3 has predicted, and what was the actual output. And on that, you are creating another learner. So there are two steps that are there. So that's why you are calling this as stacking. Okay, and this you are calling as meta learner, because you know it is applying its learning on the learning of the other base learners. Okay, and then you get the final prediction. All right. Okay, so apart from the rows, the columns may also be sampled. Okay, so what do I mean by columns? So you can actually sample some of the features. If both the rows and columns are sampled, then it is called as random patching. Okay, so you are selecting some of the rows like Bootstrap. Also, you are selecting not all columns but some of the columns. So if you simultaneously do that, then you call it as random patching. And if some of the features are sampled but all training instances are kept, then that is called as a random subspace. Okay, all right. Now you have seen that the bagging aggregator is specialized for decision tree. So that is the reason actually we studied decision tree. Okay, so bagging is actually specialized for decision tree. So is random forest. Okay, and you can see the semantic analogy, right? So if you add multiple trees, it will give you a forest. Okay, so bagged trees are correlated because you use same set of features, whereas in you can have a scheme where you select a random set of features. So you have originally 10 attributes, let's say. Okay, and you know so this is 10. Okay, and square root of 10 will be around 3. So when you are doing your choice of split attribute, you choose from out of these 3. Okay, so if you do such a scheme, then it generates a highly uncorrelated classifier. Okay, and such a classifier is called as a random forest classifier. All right, and okay, so someone is experimenting with the annotation, so please don't do it. It will disturb all the participants. Okay, and again there is another concept which is called as extremely randomized trees. So extremely randomized tree, what it will do is, it will select these 3 features. However, it will not pick the best out of the 3. Again, it will pick one of the 3. Okay, all right. So apart from this classification accuracy, random forest also gives you a very interesting output which is called as feature importance. So this is a classification problem, and in some way we are able to tell that how good a classifier an attribute is for classification accuracy, and based on that we can say that which variables or which attributes are important for the classification. Okay, all right. So there is another feature or another type of method called as boosting. So basically the 3 main types of ensembling is bagging, boosting, and random forest. All right, so here what happens is that like bagging was parallel, boosting is serial, it is sequential. So you train a model, you see that where it is going wrong. Based on that, you train your next model. So here your focus is correcting the errors that you have made. Okay, then you train the next model, and that's how you go about. and then you combine their predictions and you come up with the final prediction. Okay, so we will quickly discuss about. Okay, so again, I mean, whoever is writing on the screen, please don't do that. Okay, so just give me 1 minute. Huh? Okay, so this is a decision tree. This is a decision tree, and what is happening is that they have individual decisions. Okay, and in boosting, actually, uh, we uh, we try to give more weightage to to the errors that a particular decision tree is making. So this is a very interesting concept. So I will try to give you an example. So let's say you have 5 rows. Okay, so if you think of weightage, okay, so none of the classifiers that we know of treats the rows separately. Okay, so each of the rows probably will have a weightage of 0.2, equal weightage. Okay, if I divide that 1 by the number of observations. Okay, now let's say out of these 4, so the first level of decision tree in this 4 was correct. So what I will do is I will actually reduce their weights as I was correct on their decision. However, this one I was not correct, so I will increase this weight to maybe 0.4 or something, and I will distribute the other weight to rest of 4. The other records weight will change to 0.14. Okay, so as you are increasing the weight where you made an error, you are actually boosting it. So from there the name boosting has come. Okay, so they are built sequentially, and whenever there was an misclassification, their weights are increased, and in final prediction the votes are weighted based on the classification performance of that particular decision tree. Okay, so I was telling that there are sequential trees, like, right? So if the first decision tree has given a classification accuracy of 0.8 and the second one has given a classification accuracy of 0.9, so I will give more weightage to this decision tree's decision. All right. Okay. This is actually a difference with gradient boost and AdaBoost. So gradient boost actually builds fully grown trees, whereas AdaBoost doesn't build fully grown trees. Okay. So I will whoever is interested in competitive data science, you will know that boosting algorithms are actually state of the art and actually generates very good results. Okay, all right. So these are results from some of our experiments. So this we have done in our Kaggle notebook. Okay, so you can go through these experiments. These are shared in the next slides. Okay, so this is a problem with a sonar data set. So there are 2 classes actually. So you are sending underground sonar signals, and you want to find out whether it is a rock or whether it is a metal or a mine. Okay, this is a binary classification problem again. Okay, so if you look at the result, if you use individual classifier like support vector classifier.
Excuse me, please clear the screen. Who has done it? Please clear it.
Yes, and actually I'm not able to do that. Whoever has done
who has done it, please clear. It's not visible. It's disturbing, no?
Yeah, it's very disturbing. So now more things are coming up.
It's very unfortunate. Who is doing this? Okay, carry on, please.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I think you carry on because it's able to do. Somebody has done this. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay, let's go ahead.
Carry on.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Okay, so what this represents actually classification accuracy of individual classifiers. So this was your decision trees classification accuracy, which may be around 0.7 or something. This was your support vector machine. This was your k nearest neighbor. And when you see that you have used ensemble models, like you have used random forest, okay, or you have used a soft voting technique that we discussed, the classification accuracy has increased by quite a certain percentage. Okay, so that's the magic of ensemble, that you can directly increase your classification accuracy by 10 to 15%. Okay, all right. And here is another interesting story. So what we did is that, that random forest can give us feature importance, right? So what we tried to do is, we tried to see if this can be used, okay, to improve my decision trees. So what do I mean by this? Okay, so initially, I trained our decision tree classifier in scikit-learn, okay, and the classification accuracy that we were getting was 0.71 or 71 point some percentage. Okay, now you know that random forest actually can give you importance of features. Okay, so we calculated that importance of features, and then it has Sonar has 60 data sets. So what we did was, we started with taking the 5 top features, okay, as per random forest, then 10 top features, then 15 top features. This way we went up to 55 top features. Okay, and we, for each one of them, we found the classification accuracy. So this is the plot for the same. Okay, and you see that you remember that with like vanilla decision tree classifier, when it used 60 of the features, the classification accuracy was 71%. But now when we use when we use this number of features as 10, the classification accuracy is less than 70. As we slowly increase, you see the classification accuracy is going up. So here what can happen is that you have only 30 features instead of the 60 features, and your classification accuracy has improved by 8%. Okay, so you are not using any complex model like random forest. You are still using decision tree, and you are not using all 60 features. You are only using 30 features or 50% of the features, and your classification accuracy has gone up by 8%. So this is also one of the very important cases. And you might again ask me that, my random forest is giving me 86%. Why should I go for improving decision tree? So as I explained you earlier, that decision tree is a white box model. So that's the reason, people prefer it a lot. So if, I use less number of features, my model will be more understandable or more interpretable. Okay. All right. So now we are moving to the segment where I will tell you that how to get started with machine learning. So of course you need to learn programming. Okay. And the 2 top programming languages are Python and R. So there is no doubt about that. Okay. So this is a chart from IEEE Spectrum, which tells you the top programming languages, and you can see Python appears on the top. So just for your knowledge, do you know what this icon stands for? This actually tells that you can develop web applications. This tells you can develop mobile application. This is for desktop application, and these are for embedded devices or microcontrollers. Okay. And if you see that R is 5th, but R can only create desktop application. So that kind of tell you that, it is also quite a well used programming language. Okay. So some of the places, some of the websites from where you can learn programming are DataCamp, Simplilearn, Udemy. Okay. And then you have to also learn some amount of maths. So let me tell you this, that this is where the differentiation is. Okay. So the models are now available in GitHub, in Kaggle, in Colab. All the solutions are available. But when people are taken into internship or taken into interviews in companies, they cannot explain the basic mathematical concept behind the models. Okay. So that is the reason, this is one of the important things. How to learn the maths? Okay. Or what part of maths is to be learned? So these are some of the important things. The most important thing is linear algebra and probability theory. So you have already got a hint that why probability is necessary, okay, from today's session also. And then you also need to know some amount of multivariate calculus, algorithms, and complexity. So algorithm you may put in the computer science side also, okay. So where from you can learn, you can see from Khan Academy, Coursera, NPTEL. So Coursera, NPTEL, these are courses with more theoretical inclination, whereas Udemy or DataCamp is completely hands-on oriented. Okay, so you have to balance both of them. And of course you need to learn data structure, especially focus on graphs, because a lot of modeling are done using graphs. Okay, learn algorithm, mainly focus on approximate algorithms, okay, which are called as heuristic based algorithm, meta heuristic based algorithms. Okay, and again you can learn them from Coursera, Udacity, edX, and NPTEL. All right, okay. And read good books and research papers. Okay, so I have given some good books. So this is probably by far the most read, most appreciated books by Aurelio Gueron, who was earlier a engineer in YouTube. Then he went on to CTO of a company. Okay, so this is a brilliant book to have in your stock. Introduction to Statistical Learning. This is by Trevor Hasty and Tip Shirani. So these are also fantastic. This is also a fantastic book. Both of them are statisticians from Stanford University. Okay, so this is a book by G.V. Han on data mining. So a lot of these new books doesn't cover many algorithms. Okay, so these books. So for those algorithms, you can go to these books. And here is a book on learning to program Python. But this is not only a programming book. This actually develops your knowledge on how to write computational programs. Okay, all right. So now this book is written by John Guttag. He's a professor in MIT. And how to get research papers. So the one-stop shop is Google Scholar. You can search by your keywords. Okay, so you'll just go to scholar.google.co.in. You can search by your keywords and get your appropriate papers. Many of the papers may not be available, but if you are serious enough, you will find out tricks and tips how to find or hack those papers. Okay, then you should also apply. So learning is not good enough. How to apply? You participate in data science competitions, you do as many projects as possible, do as many internships as possible. Okay, finally write research papers. Okay, try to write conference papers, try to write journal papers, talk to your own faculty, reach out to experts outside of your institute, from industry, from other universities. Okay, network. So attend meetups, attend webinars. Okay, become member of societies, coding clubs, study groups. Okay, create your LinkedIn and GitHub profile and volunteer to talk. Okay, so give back, right? So these are also very important things. I see a lot of young people going to so many different meetups and giving such energetic and informative talks. So much we learn from them every day. Okay, so I sincerely encourage and hope all of you will also try to do that. Okay, and now like some of the research initiatives and research work that is happening in AKCSIT, the data science lab. Okay, so we are doing some research in the domain of renewable energy. So we are trying to do some prediction for solar energy. Okay, and we have some collaborative research work going on with National Institute of Wind Energy. We are doing some research on psychology. We are trying to find out factors which makes certain peoples or certain students to bully others. Okay, so this we are doing with psychology department. My core research was in feature engineering, so we are trying to do that. We are trying to expand that feature engineering in many dimensions. We are doing some research on medical imaging. So this is mainly done by Professor Amlan Chakraborty. He has tie-ups with many leading institutes and research labs and hospitals. He is doing some phenomenal and cutting edge research. Okay, and also we are doing some research on natural language processing. Mainly right now we are working on a very cutting edge model called as BART model for a problem named
Yes, hello.
yes, yes. Okay, okay. So
Hello,
you
I
know,
think the sessions. Hello.
can you see my screen?
No, no, the screen is not
Hello.
not visible. The screen is not visible anymore.
Okay, okay, okay. Can you see it now?
Yeah, yeah, it's visible
Yes,
now.
yes, yes. So basically, there are also community initiatives like talks and webinars, different workshops that we conduct. Okay, and we are also coming up with a video lecture series. Okay, so here is the YouTube link. We have quite a good response to this video lectures. So you can see a lot of machine learning topics we have covered here. So one of the good parts is that with the theories we have corresponding hands-on lectures available also, and the codes are also available through Kaggle notebooks. So you can take that notebook, change the code, run your own experiment and learn from it. Okay, so that brings us to the close of my talk. I think I have taken some more time, okay, than expected. uh, so thank you so much once again for having me here. And now I hand over to Shabnam ma'am, Gitosri ma'am for taking this forward.
Thanks a lot. That was a very encouraging session, I must say. And the students, if students or the other attendees, if you have any questions, this is the time you can ask. Or otherwise, we will just move forward. So, Professor Goswami, it was a very enriching session. Thank you for your time and for this enriching session. And we hope to organize many more such sessions in the future, and hope I will have you with us in those sessions as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There, so we can ask her to share her view about the webinar. Hello.
Pardon? Any questions?
Any questions?
So you can also write in the chat, okay, if you want. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, no problem. So you have my social coordinates, so you can definitely reach to me. Okay, so I'll give this PPT presentation also, okay, to Gitosri ma'am, so it will be available for you. Okay, so
That will be great.
one of the things that I always miss in these sessions is the interaction. Okay, but with so large participants, keeping it unmuted is very difficult. Okay, so pardon me that I could not do that. Hope we'll be in not like the normal stage very soon, where we can see you again in front of us and get more encouraged. Okay, okay, okay.
Hello.
Mr. Goswami,
Hello.
Yes,
it's
yes,
a wonderful
Sir,
session.
just a
Thank you very
question.
much.
yes, yes.
So, related to machine learning, we have heard about supervised and unsupervised learning.
Yes, yes, yes,
Sir, a little description about them.
yes,
Like,
sure.
why do we say that the machine learning is supervised, and when do we say that it is unsupervised?
Okay, so whatever discussion we had today was completely pertaining to supervised. So supervised means that like when you are reading, you have a teacher, so then it is supervised. If you are learning on your own, then it is unsupervised. So of course there is no, so teacher is here used metaphorically. Who is teaching you? The labels are teaching you. So whenever labels are available, that it is given that this email is spam, this email is normal, or this patient's data is this patient is cancerous, this patient is not cancerous. So this works as a supervisor or teacher for you. So that is a supervised learning. So clustering comes under unsupervised learning.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions? Hello?
So I have a question.
Yes, yes. Please tell me.
So when splitting is done, what if when we can't achieve a perfect split, like heterogeneity and homogeneity, what's the ratio? What's the perfect ratio? How can we know that?
Oh, yeah. So that's a good question. Actually, you know what? So only thing that you can do is you check your decision tree's classification accuracy. Okay.
Okay, sir.
At the same time, you have you heard about a term called regularization? So basically,
No, sir.
yeah. So basically, to avoid this overfitting tendency, you have something like a regularization. So what can happen is that if you make the decision tree split and split and split, it will be a very large tree. Okay, and
Yes, sir.
it will try to. And if you think that, let's say you have 100 observations in the data, for each of the
Yes, sir.
observations, if you have one decision rule, okay, you can have a decision tree, right?
Okay, sir.
Yeah, so that
Yes,
is
sir.
not something you want the decision tree to have a simple structure, but at the same time to have a good classification accuracy.
Okay, sir. Another question, sir. How do we define the attributes, like as you said, the dependent variables or the attributes, like what happens, like when there is a chance of overfitting? I think, is it directly proportional to the number of attributes that we take into account?
Okay, so it is not like that, but number of attributes also play a role. So if you have
Okay,
more
sir.
number of attributes, then your model will have tendency to overfitting, but this is not the
Yes, sir.
only reason.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Is there any other question?
Yes, sir. I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Sir, can you please explain semi-supervised learning once?
Any supervised learning once. Okay. So the algorithm that we discussed, decision tree is a supervised learning one, because if you remember that whether the movie was critical success or box office hit, or it was a flop, it was given. Okay, so decision tree is for supervised learning, and some others which I mentioned but didn't discuss the theory were logistic regression, naive Bayes, support vector machine, and all that.
Thank you, sir.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello, any questions?
I think that's the end of question answer session. So if Principal Ma'am is there, ma'am, would you like to say a few words?
I think PNC sir is there, our respected PNC sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir is there.
Sir, can you please share your thoughts? Hello. I think sir is on mute, or has he left?
And Professor Dipankar sir is also there.
Okay, sir. Dipankar sir, if you can please say a few words.
So, Dr. Goswami, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goswami. In fact, I'm an old person, so we have been learning about this right from 70s, when we used to call it machine intelligence. You know much better than me about the history. So essentially, it was I had a very cursory exposure to your pattern recognition of those days. So essentially, it's a very visit, and it has been a very pleasant session. It's very informative, educative, and I think the youngsters will be much influenced by your talk. So thank you so much. I would just like to ask one question. Of course, since I am not an expert, I am speaking president, but let me ask. Is it that people move away from this discriminant function type of classification to decision tree because it is computationally less costly?
Yes, so yes, decision tree is computationally less costly, and as I said, that the decision making is very transparent.
They,
So the end user can understand that how the decision is happening. And right now, the models that are very prevalent, like neural networks, they give very good accuracy, are very computationally expensive, but they are black box, so they don't tell you how the decision making is taking place. Because once you know, let's say you want to find out that why a customer is moving away, so you not only want to directly accurately predict, but you also want to know that which factors are pushing him to leave your organization. Okay, so that is where decision tree has an edge.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it has been a very exciting session, and it must have influenced many of the youngsters. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay then, thank you.
তোমাকে পুচি আমি কত 1.5 বছর ধরে তোকে আমি ডাকিনি, আজকে প্রবলেমটা হয়েছে বলে পুচি তোমাকে প্লিজ মিউট দিস। তোমার এখন ভাত বেড়ে তোমার মা দাঁড়িয়ে আছে।
হ্যালো রূপাদি, হ্যালো
পাপিউ, প্লিজ মিউট,
প্লিজ মিউট।
ভাতটা গাইলে আমি করতে পারি।
Hello.
Okay then, so if there is now nothing more,
Thank you, Dr. Goswami, for your wonderful session.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure always. And coming
and participants,
yeah.
I will share you the feedback in our group, in a WhatsApp group, and it will be active for 10 to 15 minutes. Please fill up the feedback form and check your email for your certificates. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you are sending the feedback form in mail?